It's time to get sexy on Secular Sexuality.
Hello and welcome to Secular Sexuality, the ACA show that is hot enough to melt steel beams. With me, of course, tonight is my favorite black sheep, Bianca.
Hello.
And here with us is my colleague and family systems therapist, Madison Hollis.
Hey, y'all.
All right. So we're going to be talking a lot about family and relationships and coping with maybe not being able to be around the people you love as much as you would like. So if you have questions, if you have stories that are reminiscent of that, or just want to call in with questions about how to deal with family relationships, we have the people to talk to about that on the show today. So give us a call at 512-991-9242. That's 512-991-9242. Or you can call the show from anywhere in the world for free online at tiny.cc/callsex. So we want to hear from you guys as well.
All right. Well, Madison, let's jump right into it.
Sure.
The Venn diagram of queer folks and atheists who end up dejected or even rejected by their family of origin has a lot of overlap. So just how common is it in today's world to experience that kind of family separation or alienation?
You know, Christy, it's a lot more common than one might think. And especially, like you said, many individuals last month during Pride Month were reminded of this and reminded of that separation or rejection that they may have experienced. But I mean, there's no secret that there's a lot of division in our country right now. And with that, the division comes in at a lot of different levels. So when individuals' core values or their morals are rejected from their family members, it can cause a lot of pain and hurt. And we're talking about differences in opinion or views regarding the Black Lives Matter movement, COVID-19 related differences, as well as very strong and different political views that are happening.
Yeah, I mean, it's an election year. We're seeing rampant conspiracy theories, a lot of mask debates, widespread distrust of government, social outrage. I mean, how prepared should we be for things to get a lot worse before they get better?
Well, I feel as though, there's irreparable damage, unfortunately, in the trust of our government that has happened. For them to be able to act appropriately to keep all citizens safe, as well as hear people and citizens in their needs for social change. There's been quite a disruption all around. No one can really predict what will happen next, of course. However, I believe that we should be mentally prepared to be able to cope with the heaviness of the world indefinitely. To say it's going to end tomorrow is a dream. However, just taking the steps to take care of ourselves in the interim is so important. So I think it's best for now not to assume that this will all be over soon, but rather prepare ourselves for this ongoing issues, deeper societal issues that may not even be solved in our lifetime, unfortunately.
I've actually found that it's easier to deal with knowing that it's going to be around for a while instead of wondering, is this going to end tomorrow? Is this a thing that I'm not going to have to think about in a week? When you look at it long term and like, okay, this is something that I'm going to have to incorporate into my life in a healthy way and have these kinds of conversations and do this kind of introspection, it actually, I feel, sets me up for a better way of coping, to just know that I've got some time to settle into this new life, this new routine, and find a healthy way to deal with everything.
Right.
Yeah, lean into the weird, just kind of accept that this is not going away anytime soon.
When we said keep Austin weird, this isn't what we meant.
Yeah, no, This is, I would call it a global weird, and I'm sure that's valid. But I mean, us here in the States are definitely having a different time of it, honestly, through our own making. And we can talk about what's just and what we deserve, but the crisis is dire. And even outside of this particular moment, I mean, in the 2 years that we've been doing this version of the show, we've gotten countless calls from folks, particularly, teenagers, people in their early to mid 20s who have been totally thrust out of their families, who find themselves with no social support, with no connection, often without any kind of home. And I know that there are a lot of people watching right now who are shaking their heads and saying that they would never do that to their own children, that they don't understand where that type of aggression or fixation on religious ideals and these kinds of ideas, how they would never kick out their own kids. And I'm sure that's true for many, many people, but it's still happening all the time. I mean, what kinds of things lead to this sort of violation of our family norms and expectations?
Well, typically when an individual, for example, a parent, their inherent belief or certain core moral values are shaken by their child or by any family member, really, whether that be religious, family tradition, political tradition, that they hold so strongly to their core identity is questioned. The parent may become incredibly defensive or confused about how and why they may have brought up their child in a certain way in a certain household with these certain beliefs. And then their child is coming to them questioning it or presenting them with different beliefs. And for some people, it's just so incredibly difficult for them to have their identity questioned like that. Durkheim, a very famous sociologist, brought up this notion of social norms in society, social norms and values and being accepted into a group, right? Well, that's not very different with a family setting and the norms that family systems hold. So, it can be said the same way, where in a family system, if an individual is ostracized or they're presenting these different views, they could be met with harsh criticism or withdrawal of support altogether. And all of this is in hope that the individuals who is exhibiting this deviant family behavior will begin adhering more closely to the group norms. However, most individuals will stand strong in what they believe and stand strong in their identity. So this produces, an extreme norm violation in the family, which then turns into ostracizing the individual and completely cutting off contact.
Mm-hmm. I mentioned at the top that this is something that a lot of queer folks experience, but it's also something a lot of atheists experience. Who is most vulnerable to this kind of risk? Who should we be concerned about losing access to their family?
Well, during this extreme political climate, when a lot of different issues are being brought out and in families and things are being questioned and different opinions are being brought forth, everyone is at risk. Everyone is at risk of having, a negative family member come forth and say, that's not right. You shouldn't believe in that. You shouldn't, feel that way, be that way. And, just depending on the individual's relatability or similarity to their family system, if they have any sort of differences in beliefs or values, they are at risk for this to happen.
So as we become maybe more polarized, we're also becoming more tribal, but
Right.
in this sort of weird modern understanding of what that means, because tribal used to refer to your family group, used to refer to the people that you were interacting with so closely and for so long.
Right, exactly.
Sorry.
Yeah, please speak.
Do you have an understanding? Every time I hear about a social norm and the violation and the reaction to the violation, it comes up a lot in the other shows that I'm on and a lot in the conversations I have online. And I'm always curious to hear the perspective of people who know a little bit about this in terms of where that originally comes from. Like, what about the psychology? What about the history of our evolution makes that a thing that happens? Why do we react to violations of social norms in such a violent way?
Well, and thinking about exactly what Christy was saying and more of that like tribal sense, even dating back to then, there are these core beliefs in what is right and what is wrong. And when we're talking about somebody's identity or the way that they, believe or hold their values as part of their identity, it can get really confusing really, really quickly. So when it, like I was saying, when it's questioned, when that inherent belief or core value is questioned, or an individual comes forward saying, I don't align with you on this, unfortunately, people who have, lived their entire life in that identity just can't seem to wrap their head around it. It leaves them feeling confused. It leaves them feeling, ashamed. And so, altogether, there's a lot that can happen within family systems where their core is shaken. Their core identity is shaken to a point of no return. So unfortunately, it can turn violent. It can turn into something that some people can never imagine doing to family members. But when, your identity is in question, people, their true sense of self comes forward a little bit.
Yeah, I'm curious, V, if you have a beat on this, just philosophically, how a person's belief in a god or in these core values that Madison's referring to, how they can override something that we think of or assume as being so foundational. We think of like a parent's love for their child as the absolute bedrock of any society, but that's definitely not the case.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, it feels very much like a lot of these systems, especially the ones that are the most aggressive when confronted, have already wrapped possible confrontation into the mindset, into the doctrine, into the talking points. So it becomes less of a, oh, there's somebody contradicting this thing that I believe. That's interesting. That's never happened before. What does this mean? How do I deal with this? It becomes less of that, and there's already a narrative there implanted, right? There's already the narrative that, oh, when they're contradicting this belief, what they're actually saying is that they don't love me anymore, or they want to leave, or they think that I'm stupid, or whatever it is, has already kind of been tainted by the fact that these conversations have been misrepresented at large. So I think, from a perspective of just looking at the systems themselves, it feels very much like you're set up for failure either way, whether you're the person being confronted or the person doing the confronting. There's this third party, which is the thought process itself, that often is in the way and really messes up that communication style.
Yeah, I mean, just responding quickly to some issues raised in the chat, I'm curious if this seems like something that is getting better or worse on the scale of like human history. Obviously, this is a moment of incredible tension in our country, but as our society gets bigger and bigger, as our population has doubled in the last 50, 60 some odd years, are tribes changing? Are they getting bigger? Are we more or less willing to accept our families as our dynamics shift? I don't know if those questions have answers, but I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts.
Yeah, well, I think it gets presented, especially in the age of social media and everything, where you're able to connect with people easily, that even if you aren't getting that familial support in the way that you want, my hope would be that you're able to find that elsewhere. You're able to find that acceptance, that love, just the genuine yearning to have your thoughts be heard by others who actually care and actually want to hear what you have to say. So I think what's happening too is a lot of individuals that are rejected by families, by their own families, going out and finding that support elsewhere. So it's, violating that familial norm of, always connecting with your blood and being super close to them. Well, there's other options, though. There's other people out there who are willing to respect you and love you for who you are.
Do you think that the fact that there are more communities more family units, let's say, that are open to you, does that, maybe we've always been this divided, but we didn't have the option to go seek out a family unit that fits us better or accepts us for who we are? So perhaps it's less that nowadays people are fighting more internally with their families, with their communities, and more, oh, I can still survive if I leave this community. I can go find another one that has been set up to accommodate me better.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, I should highlight for everybody here that a lot of this conversation kind of started or came from a blog that you wrote, Madison, and we've got links and things to that in the footnotes to this episode. I really encourage people to check that out. But you talk a lot about the difference between family of origin and your chosen family. And it sounds like that's a huge piece of what we're talking about here. As our global community becomes more accessible, queer folks in particular, who are just going to genetically spring up one in every, 5 to 10 people, depending on how you measure it or who you ask, those people now have access to folks who are more like them. And that maybe is part of why I guess we're more willing to lose our family of origin, to shed our family of origin.
Right, exactly. Like I was saying, just being able to find that support elsewhere. And, family of choice is something that you're able to make on your own. Your family of origin is not what you choose, but what you're born into. And family of choice is individuals that you do choose to have in your life for a reason. You can kind of cherry pick them and they can cherry pick you right back to ensure that you instill that community, instill those ideals that you want from a family, that you want from others.
I'd imagine it's very similar to the stats about, divorce rates are skyrocketing. They skyrocketed right after it became okay to leave without cause, right? And it's less about, suddenly the institution of marriage is failing astronomically. It's, I have this option now. I'm financially independent. I can provide for myself. I'm not going to be shunned by the rest of society if I do this. So it feels, even statistically looks like there's this big shift happening, when really it is that ability to stand on your own 2 feet a little bit better.
Yeah, whenever I do couples counseling and I'm working with a new couple, one of the first things I ask is, are we here to figure out how to stay together? Are we here to figure out how to break up in a kind and peaceful way? Or are we here to figure out which is which? And in that same way, it sounds like the family institution maybe hasn't been serving us all that well. And as much as we venerate it, as important as it is, it's crumbling a little bit, and that's concerning, but it's also crumbling because we may be replacing it with something that could be better serving to folks with minority views, with minority orientations or identities.
Yeah. Do you ask them both to say which one they're picking on the count of 3?
Yeah. It's usually something that comes up in the consultation, so they know. They have an answer. It may not be the right answer, but they tend to be very quick with the answer that they know. Well, Madison, one more question before I let Vi take us onto the phones.
Sure.
What, if any, are some of the warning signs? I know that varies family by family, situation by situation, but is there anything that we can glean from the law of big numbers, from looking at research and statistics on these issues?
Right. Well, I think warning signs, like number one, that's sometimes unnoticeable, is the grief that comes up. So estrangement and separation isn't necessarily something that always happens in, you're cut off, I'm never talking to you again. It doesn't always happen right then and there. It might be a slow process. So grief sometimes goes unnoticed in the way that it can grow and happen over a period of time. The loss is processed at a delayed rate. So when you, as the adult child, for example, find yourself policing your thoughts or policing your views around your family members when you're having a conversation with them, or maybe they're speaking out about what they believe, or you're avoiding certain topics, just out of fear of sharing your own opinion, that it to me is a warning sign that you're stopping yourself from being your true self and being able to share your thoughts openly. I think another common warning sign is just avoiding communication altogether. You call your parents once a week, and then that kind of trickles off because you just don't want to have these conversations because they're exhausting to you. So another thing to notice, exhaustion after having, even a short conversation with family members.
Yes.
And, just it from the parental view, or, just any family member that you may be having these issues with, when you notice excessive attempts to control you, to police your thoughts and things like that, where it's noticeable, that's, just again, another warning sign to kind of look out for.
Yeah, I just as a quick aside think it's a really good thing for people to be taking notice of what leaves them exhausted. So much of being a therapist is just like, yeah, and how did that feel? Because people aren't always asking themselves those questions, and it's a really valuable data point to be, basing your life on.
Absolutely.
So with that, V, who do you have for us? I'd love to jump on the phones.
Yeah. Let's talk with Matthew in New York.
Great.
Matthew. Hello, can you hear us?
Hey everyone. I just wanted to get your opinion on something that happened to me a while ago. Is it all right if I go ahead?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So over the 4th of July week, I spent the week with a friend and their family, and we had a barbecue with one of their family friends, right? And they have this small ethnic community in that area, very close knit. It has certain ethnic uniqueness that goes with having that small community in an alien country,
Mm-hmm.
So they kind of cling together and they have that whole community group. And one thing I noticed was this friend, the family whom we visited for the barbecue, the father was very, very clearly abusive. I later spoke to my friend and I heard things like, hey, the father has a wife, they have a joint account, and the father doesn't give access to the wife to take any money out of the account. He routinely insults his 2 daughters and praises his son. He has on occasion gotten drunk and physically hurt them. And the mother, I don't know what her plan is, but she seems to be hesitant to go to any institution or authority to kind of resolve it. Maybe it's because her daughters are still, 14 and 16, and she's waiting until they can kind of get to a point where they're able to get their education before she takes some action. Just want to know, do you know any resources? I don't know how to report this because the friend whom I spoke to doesn't want to report it, and their family doesn't want to report it because that they have that community and they're afraid of, community backlash, which is like, hey, why did you stick your nose into this family's business? Now you've ruined the perfectly good family, that sort of stuff.
Right.
Any advice or resources would be great, very helpful.
Yeah. Well, I can only empathize from a personal angle. It sounds very similar to what I grew up in, and a very similar situation that my mom was in, having to decide, should I leave while the kids are young, and risk that particular kind of damage, or do I leave now and not wait until they get older? And there are considerations there, and it was a process of many conversations had with my mom and my siblings to finally decide to leave. But we also were part of a very small church community, so not a cultural one in that sense, but still a very tightly knit group of people who would have judged if the family split up. You ruined a good family. That hit very close to home just now. So I can certainly empathize personally, but in terms of resources and next steps, I think I'm going to leave that to the relationship therapists that I've got on with me today.
Well, and Matthew, your connection is a little bit weak, so I'm going to acknowledge that I missed a couple of things you said. I guess I want to make sure to summarize this a little bit and make sure I understand you. It sounds like you are coming into a family that's not your own. You're witnessing some things that sound really misogynistic, that sound really problematic in a lot of different ways. And because it's a minority culture that you're not familiar with and a family that's not directly your own, but that impacts you, you're kind of trying to figure out your role in all of this and whether or not you have a right or a responsibility to step in. Is that sort of a fair way of framing your question?
Yeah, that would be fairly accurate, Christy. Thank you.
Okay, well, yeah, I know that these are definitely tricky items. Any family is going to have really complex dynamics, and it's difficult to know what our part in that is, especially when we're coming into this system that has existed for so long without us. Madison, what kind of tips do you have for being sensitive, but also, I suppose, proactive?
Right. And it is. I will say it's difficult to come into a situation where it's not your personal family, but maybe the family of a friend or a partner, and not knowing what to do or your place in it. So, first of all, good for you for wanting to reach out and do something about it, or, try to step in a little bit. The first thing I heard, and I guess my concern, is that there's children in the home. And when we're thinking about domestic violence or issues like that, the number one thing is that those children are kept safe. So when I'm thinking of, next steps or things that need to happen, and of course, obviously completely up to you, if there's anything like domestic violence or something happening in the home, you can make an anonymous tip to CPS, Child Protective Services, so that they can do their own investigation and everything. And I know that sounds like a lot. It sounds like it might be a little bit scary. However, you're also doing your due diligence and keeping those children safe. Of course, his partner in the situation also should be kept safe, but children in the household is number one priority here. As far as resources go, there are a whole bunch of resources as far as women who are battered or abused. There are resources for her on where she can go and what she can do. However, it is up to you if you want to share some of those resources with her or offer them to her. But again, that's kind of completely around your comfortability and how much you want to interject in the situation.
Yeah, it's important to remember that there are certainly instances where it's necessary for us as members of a society, as maybe a tangential member of this family, to step in. But when we do that, we're very much risking breaking something that has already been existing safely or somewhat safely for a long time before we got there. And so when you start to disrupt that, when you start to push things around, you can be really intensifying some of those risks and some of that danger, which is something that I think you need to be in real communication with your partner about, really careful and and just slow and hesitant to do.
Yeah, I can speak from experience here too. I had some outside family members, extended family, who didn't understand the full extent of what was going on, but were aware that there was an issue. And as well-intentioned as they were in kind of trying to needle and get into there and figure out what was going on and make sure that we were okay, ultimately what it ended up doing was worsening things because they didn't have a final kind of the term final solution is a terrible one, but they didn't have a
ultimate
final
conclusion
as to how to go about actually rectifying it. So they would get my dad mad and then leave. And that's not a good situation to be in. So if you do decide to move forward in helping this family, I would say make sure that it is a final thing. Like you get all of the resources and make sure that they can get to safety as soon as that break happens. Because if they are still stuck there when this is all going down, that could be potentially very dangerous.
I know those are some pretty tricky responses to leave you with, Matthew. This is obviously a tricky situation and not something that, three strangers on the internet are necessarily equipped to fix for you. But I do hope that we're kind of maybe answering that question a little bit and pointing you in the right direction. What kinds of things are coming to mind for you? What kind of tips or resources could we point you towards?
I guess one thing that comes to mind is the cultural piece. This they come from a culture where divorce is kind of once a woman's divorced, she's basically excommunicated from society almost. It's a very traditional, unfortunately, mindset that exists in this community, but I'm a little worried about that. That's something I'll have to think about before I stick my nose into the family's business. Mm-hmm. Another thing is that, I guess Child Protective Services is a good place to start. I don't think they fully understand that they can live without the husband. It seems to be like a very, again, a traditional mentality. They're immigrants, first generation. So lots to consider.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds multifaceted, and certainly there is no one correct answer. But it's good that you're aware that this is happening and that you want to help. And I don't know, I just say make sure that whatever it is you do, you make sure that the people you are helping are actually benefiting from it and are in a safe environment when it's all over.
Yeah, tread lightly. You are not necessarily going to be disrupting things if you gently offer a safe place to stay or simply let somebody know that you are available. Even that can be a potentially dangerous or transgressive act. So whatever amount of caution feels natural and intuitive to you, let me encourage you to interrogate that and potentially double it. Because while I never want to encourage people to just stand by and allow others to be abused, I want to really caution you to the potential dangers of intervening in a way that's inappropriate when you don't necessarily know the lay of the land.
Absolutely.
And I trust you more than us. You're there on the ground. You see the situation. So just use your best judgment and be cautious is, I think, where I would leave it. Did y'all have any final points to offer?
I just agree with what y'all are saying as far as keeping a safe space or providing a safe space, maybe for them to be or to go in this scenario. 100%.
Well, so I don't want to disrupt what the family is doing, but I will keep these resources in my back pocket, and I've made myself available to the daughters and to the mother and the children and the mother. So if they do need something, they're free to reach out to me. And now I have some resources that I can kind of point them towards. So that helps.
Good. Wonderful. Thank you so much for calling in.
It is a complicated situation. I understand. Thank you. Thank you for taking my call, and appreciate it. I'm sure they will if I ever get to help them out. Thank you.
Of course. Stay safe.
Take care.
Yeah.
Vi, before we jump into that next call, I guess I just want to remind everybody that Madison actually put together a great list of different readings and different ideas exploring this topic. A lot of those are in the footnotes to this episode. In particular, like I said, a link to her blog. So we're going to continue to be discussing some national resources as well as just some good readings and things to be aware of. So if you find yourself in a situation like Matthew, or worse yet, find yourself in a situation like the people Matthew was describing, I hope that you are able to take a look at some of those resources. And God, I just hope that they're helpful.
Yeah.
With that, do you have anybody else for us now?
Yeah, we've got Geo in Florida. Geo, hello.
Hey there.
Hi there.
Hey,
What can we help you with
great
tonight?
to be on. Well, I'll try and keep it short. So I essentially have two questions. Can I give you a little bit of backstory, context?
Sure, go for it.
All right. So my family, so just to tie off of what Matthew was saying, U.S. culture kind of makes it easy for people to separate from their families in a way, or to have these different living arrangements. You leave for college and everything. But for immigrants, there are much stronger family ties in a way that kind of force you there, especially for Eastern cultures. My family specifically is Brazilian, but so my parents are missionaries. We moved around a ton. And I've noticed for a long time that my father just kind of uses his pastoral leadership as a mask for his narcissism and to be able to manipulate situations as he wishes.
Damn, so many people resonating with my story tonight. Okay, continue. I feel ya.
It's, yeah, I've actually taken a lot of inspiration from your story. And, there's this thing called third culture kids, which I think it's you're growing up as an immigrant family, but then there's all these things that they bring over, and you essentially are in this different culture, but there's no conversation about that. There's no kind of consolidation of what you want for your life versus what they wanted for your life. And then add religion into the mix, and it becomes this whole smorgasbord of things to wade through.
Oof, yes.
So I've noticed for a long time my father's abusive emotionally, but in a way, unfortunately, I wish he was physically abusive, because then I could call CPS or something. I could just have more of an excuse in a way to separate myself from him. I decided to separate from him about 3 years ago. I'm 26, and that last conversation I had on the phone with him, telling him, he still guilt tripped me, he still gaslighted me, and I still played right into it. And then at the end of it, I was like, what the fuck? Who am I? So that was when I knew I just had to stop.
Yeah.
Gio, I want to very quickly, I hate to disrupt where you're going, but I just want to very quickly highlight something you said, because it was incredibly brave, and I'm sure it resonated with a lot of folks listening. It can be super uncomfortable to acknowledge what you're talking about when you say, well, he didn't beat us, he didn't physically assault us, and it can feel kind of gross, I think, for a lot of people to think, well, why would you wish for that? At the same time, I know what you're saying resonates with a lot of people listening. And so I just wanted to give that moment just a second to breathe, because I think that's a really universal experience.
Especially if he's a pastor and a leader. There's almost how could he hurt you? How could he have manipulated you?
He's so beloved by so many people every Sunday. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Right. How many souls has he saved, But the story's not so pretty at home, as much as he never had intimate conversations. I'm convinced he's a narcissist. But anyway, I just really want, there's so much to unpack here, and I don't want to, the question is about actually, one, traumatic sexual memories, and then my duty to my family to kind of help in the healing of all this, if maybe they do or don't even want to heal. My sister's finally realizing how abusive it kind of was. I've always known. I decided to separate, and gladly my mom divorced from my dad, so I was able to continue a relationship with my mother. That's how much it was, where I just felt I couldn't have a relationship with my mother until she was divorced from him. And So my sister recently, she's been doing a lot of self-work on herself. She's older than me, so she's had time to kind of go through and a lot of therapy, a lot of and she recently uncovered like in her body this traumatic sexual memory with my father, and now she's like realizing, yeah, maybe I shouldn't be talking to him. And I just, so what comes up for me is like, oh my God, finally someone in my family is waking up, because I have 2 other siblings who are still heavily religious and still talk to him. And I want to talk about healing, but it comes up against the religion. It comes up against these things. And so when my sister told me about this, I was like, oh my gosh, yes, like we shouldn't be talking to him. Like we should not support this man. So I don't want to compete with her. I don't want to compete in the pain, because I didn't have any kind of sexual anything, but I still felt the emotional trauma. And so I want to understand how we can rely on each other. If you have any thoughts about that. And then secondly, like, should we even try to open our family up to the kinds of abuse? My oldest sister, the other one, has a kid, and I'm seeing kind of emotional patterns in parenting, and I'm very worried for my niece in a way. So I want to have these conversations. I've been looking at Anthony Magna Bosco for being able to have Socratic kind of questions, just very unaggressive. But at the same time, you know, if they don't want help, like where do we go from here? You know, because part of it has to do with the religion. So yeah.
Damn. Yeah, I'm gonna sit with this for a minute because it hit kind of close to home. So, Christy, if you want to take this.
Yeah, I think just to say that this is a terribly common experience, which is not to say that it's any less important, any less painful or significant. I think the best advice that you can really start from is just making sure that everybody involved, and that you yourself in particular, are taking care of yourself on a really foundational level. You know, eating, sleeping, exercising, showering. Those things sound so basic, but I have to emphasize how important they are, especially when this old war wound starts to act up, when you start to feel sort of itchy in your trauma center, when these issues are coming up more and more often. That's when you really need to double down on taking care of some of those basic issues. Madison, what else comes to mind for you?
Well, what I'm thinking about, similar to what you're saying, Christy, is just inherently making sure that you're taking care of yourself. And as you're having these conversations with your sister, also checking in with her to see, you know, how she is going with her own therapy, if she feels comfortable enough to be exploring these issues already. And, you know, I think just because it sounds like y'all two kind of have that camaraderie and are having these realizations together, I think even just starting there, digging a little bit deeper, having these discussions and questions with each other and exploring that a little bit more before you open up the conversation to other family members who may be a little bit more resistant. So at least the two of you are aligned and can kind of come at it together with similar perspectives.
Right. Right.
Yeah. And I can't emphasize enough the concept of just being there, just being somebody that your sisters, plural, know they can go to if they need to. But my siblings and I don't talk about my dad very often. It'll come up every once in a while, and we're aware that we have this shared history. And thankfully, everybody is on the same page in terms of, yes, this was bad and abusive, and I'm glad it's over. But I still don't know exactly how they've processed their individual traumas. And I don't know enough about their journey to be the one to broach that. But I have made it clear to all of them that if they needed to talk about something, I was here. And that by itself is something that we weren't afforded in our house, right? Oh, if you need to talk about something, I'm here. I'm not going to judge you. I'm not going to gaslight you. I'm going to affirm you and respect your experience. So by itself, it can be an immensely healing thing.
Right. Even just having you guys as a resource, honestly, like just hearing the stories. I think I've said it before, like, this is one of my favorite shows, and I'm guilty to admit I missed out for a couple months just because, what Christy said, like, I'm not taking care of myself. I am taking out a lot of things on myself, and I'm trying to get out of that. And, but just honestly, it's good to know that I'm not alone in this. And yeah, I will try and lean on my sister. It's a good idea. I appreciate it.
I think it's incredibly worth just highlighting again that there is this human desire, this need to like rush in. We see a fire, we see a problem, we want to fix it. And I get that vibe. I get that instinct. V, we've talked about your story a little bit. I know that a lot of that resonates with me. My sister and I are incredibly close, and she will come to me to talk about our father, but it is really more for listening. I've learned after a lot of experiences to keep my mouth shut and to just be there. And honestly, afterwards, I'm absolutely exhausted. It's as if I did run into a burning building. It's as if I did do something dramatic. And by just existing, by just being there and then doing the things that you need to do in order to continue to exist, taking care of yourself, making sure that you have all of your needs met and you have your oxygen mask on so that you're available. Right, exactly. For you to be her resource is important. That is as much as you need to do. Like you don't need to feel compelled to do more, to fix it, to be there is enough. But at the same time, that is exhausting and that is going to take a toll on you. So you need to make sure that you have people who can be there for you as well. It's like a massage train, except for trauma.
Right. Yeah.
That's a visual. That'll play.
It makes me think, it makes me even more energized to take care of myself, to think like, oh, there's a future that I can help heal. It's like, oh, I can wake them up. But like, there is this huge desire of me to just shake them and be like, you're hurting my knees. But like, it's almost energizing to know that I have this work ahead of me, and it's not just for myself, but it does help to think like I'm taking care of myself for this other reason. It almost gives me a little bit more inspiration. So yeah, I think that's something to note too. Mm-hmm.
Also, sorry to belabor this and jump in with one more thought. On the subject of your niece, that's heartbreaking. And I do not have siblings with children, being the oldest sibling. But I can't imagine having to see that happen. So that sounds absolutely draining and terrible. But one thing that you can do for her is thrive yourself, because if anything, at the very least, if she understands that her life right now is not great, but she looks at you and she knows that you went through a similar thing and you're doing well and you're thriving and you're happy and you're healthy and you're getting the help you need, that by itself is going to give her so much hope as well.
Right.
In an oppressive system, living well is a transgressive act. Take care of yourself. Do what you can.
Seriously. Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate you all.
Yeah, thanks so much for calling. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for calling in. And call back. Let us know how things go. If you have a conversation with your sister, if you come up against new questions or new issues, let us know.
For sure. Thanks so much. Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm going to go meditate after this.
Sounds like a good plan.
All right.
Okay. Have a good night.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
Very quickly before we jump back into the interview, I think it's worth noting that everybody watching this right now may be feeling some kind of way. There's a lot of folks in our audience that are kind of shaking their head going, yep, remember that happened to me, that happened to me. And, I said it last week, I'll say it again today. We love that you're here, but if you need to pause this and come back to it, if you need to yeet your tablet out of the room so that you can go take a bath, do those things. Be taking care of yourself first and foremost. And if we can offer resources, support, education, great. But we can only do those things if you are okay, if you're calm, if you're rested, if you're relaxed, if your nervous system doesn't have a million alarm bells going off. So I hope that everybody listening right now is taking care first and foremost of those alarm bells before they're worrying about the larger picture. So,
good reminder.
Yeah, with that, Madison, I know that a lot of this feels very, very obvious and very personal. You know, everybody's individual experience is going to vary. It's hard to talk about it in aggregate. But I think there's a lot of value in sort of being able to identify some of the challenges that come with this type of alienation and disconnection. So how does this kind of thing affect people emotionally?
Well, like speaking on what I was saying earlier about the shame and disappointment, that happens and can happen on both ends, whether it's the person that's alienating their child or the child who's being alienated. There's shame, there's disappointment from the other person of not finding that understanding, not finding that acceptance. Like I was mentioning earlier too, the feeling of loss, you know, it can be equivalent to losing somebody from a death. Like if you know that that person's going to be gone for the rest of your life, even though they're still alive, they're still here, that can be incredibly traumatic and hard to cope with. Ambivalence comes up for a lot of people because, you know, on one end, you love your family member, but on the other end, they're rejecting you and they're rejecting your core sense of self. So there's ambivalence towards how to feel about them, how to feel about the family unit if nobody's coming to help you, you know, coming forward and saying like, hey, mom, hey, dad, you're wrong. It's not okay for you to say this, which is another common thing that happens is you have maybe siblings or other family members who are too afraid to step up and defend you. Confusion obviously comes up, confusion and just why is this happening? Why can't I be accepted? Why can't they hear me out? You know, it's this underlying view, regardless of, you know, what you believe in or how you were raised, that you believe that your family unit is always going to be there for you, no matter what you do or what you say, they're supposed to always love you. So a lot of confusion comes up for people who start to become ostracized or alienated. And then I really want to highlight this because it's so important. It's totally normal and okay to feel angry, to feel frustrated, to feel, you know, like just completely overwhelmed with the fact that you are being rejected by your own family member. And a lot of feelings of anger and frustration can come along with that. Of course, underlying anger and frustration will be that hurt and that sense of feeling hurt, but that is a completely normal thing to experience.
Yeah, you know, the more we as therapists begin to study and understand trauma, the more we recognize that it impacts us in all of these different kind of ways. And the tendrils of it can seep into just every aspect of life.
Right.
How does this kind of thing affect people's health? How does it affect them economically?
Well, when we think about, you know, stress or anxiety and what we know about how that affects the body, that can result in things where, you know, we don't necessarily correlate it all the time. You might develop headaches, you might develop muscle tension, you might develop insomnia just because there's so much heaviness going on in your mind-body connection. You know, if you repeatedly feel anxious and stressed and it lasts for a long time, your body just never gets the signal to return to normal functioning, to calm down and get back to your baseline. So that can weaken your immune system, which is really important, obviously now, but it can weaken your immune system, which leaves you vulnerable to viral infections and frequent illnesses. So, you know, you notice that coming up a lot too, if you start getting sick easily, making that connection there. And then anxiety can also affect your excretory and digestive systems. So it's really crazy how it's all connected, but these things are very real. So you might experience stomach ache, nausea, diarrhea, digestive issues, loss of appetite. So just thinking about it there. And then anxiety disorders also cause for higher heart rate, blood pressure, cardiovascular issues that can come up. So paying attention to that. If you have chest pain or anything like that, it might be linked to the anxiety that you're experiencing. As far as financially, many people have financial assistance from their family members, especially emerging adults in this generation. They are getting financial help, whether that's with school or rent or whatever it is. And, many are unemployed right now. So they're also leaning back on their family system for financial support. So if you become, if you say the wrong thing or, get cut off, that can mean that you become homeless. That can mean that you can't attend school anymore. So I think that's also coming up for a lot of people is like, I may not be able to speak out because then my finances are cut off. So that's very real for many people too.
Yeah, no, this is a moment. I mean, it's July 30th as we record this. August is just about to start. Rent is going to come due. The additional support that was being provided by the federal government for unemployment is set to run out at a time when a lot of people, particularly folks in their teens and 20s, are still lacking access to their jobs in a safe way. I mean, this is a scary time financially to be standing up against that racist uncle who, is very concerned about which lives do and don't matter, or to be coming out during Pride Month this season, or these kinds of things. This is a really multifaceted problem.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
What other kind of unforeseen consequences or other considerations should people keep in mind? If you have experienced this kind of trauma and you feel like you've got your feet under you, I know that there's a tendency to be in your own head, to tell yourself it's not that hard. You can power through, you can do this. And that's true. And we definitely want to support people. But I think people miss how insidious and how damaging this can be.
Exactly. And I think something, to recognize or just maybe pay attention to notice that if you're experiencing this right now, is that you may also notice that you're acting out in your close relationships, or you're having behavioral issues arise from the loss or the trauma of your family, and it's kind of coming out in different facets. And I emphasize the close relationships because, our partners or best friends or whoever it may be, it's like we feel comfortable kind of acting out towards them. So they may be at greater risk of that. But I think that's just something, unforeseen consequences that may come up for people is, it's a lot. It's heavy. And that can sometimes come out in different ways with our own close relationships, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think that's very true. Unsurprisingly, we've got a number of folks who are calling in who I think are experiencing a lot of these same kind of issues. So before we turn back towards the phones, anything else that you think people should just keep on their radar as all of this trauma gets sort of stirred up this summer?
Yes. So I did just mention acting out, but the complete opposite may happen where you experience total withdrawal and social isolation from your close relationships. It just becomes difficult to deal with and difficult to handle. And you may feel like you don't want to put that weight on the people around you. So just completely disengaging, it's easy to do, right? We're not seeing anybody right now anyway. So just not picking up the phone, not answering your text messages. If you start really noticing that loneliness sinking in, when you start feeling maybe a little self-critical or you experience low self-esteem, that's another, I feel like, thing to look out for. What is very common in these situations is that perfectionist type thinking, where it can almost become like obsessive of I have to fix things or I have to make things perfect or I have to keep my family together or whatever that may be. So it can come out in a lot of different ways. Feeling of powerlessness or worthlessness. Like I said, with the outbursts in relationships, also clinginess in relationships, because you are detaching maybe from your family and trying to seek that out in other relationships. So just being aware of how you are and how you are interacting in your relationships, I think is just something to look out for, and not being afraid to ask for help. Like I was talking about with your family of choice, if you feel comfortable enough to share with them what you're experiencing, but more importantly, you don't have to share with them everything going on with you, but just reach out, and having that connection can really, really help and alleviate some of that pain you're experiencing. The feeling of being wanted, the feeling of being heard and loved by others can be really helpful in situations like this.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate all of that. Vi, who do you have for us?
Yeah, let's jump to Johnathan in Alabama.
Hi there, B. Thanks for picking me.
For sure, you're on topic, so that's a good indicator that we'll pick you close. So, what's going on tonight? Hello? All right, we're gonna pop you back on into the queue, and go to Steve in Arizona. Hello, Steve.
Howdy.
Hey there.
How are you guys doing?
Doing good. What can we help you with tonight?
Well, basically, I'm here for education.
All right.
So, the last week or two, I've inserted myself into a couple of tweet threads and tried to discuss issues with individuals who are non-binary or trans, and I pretty much got hammered, and so I wanted to kind of come back and try to educate myself. So I went and I watched Alexander's videos, and then figured I would call into the show and kind of get some other information so that I am not as ignorant as I once was.
Well, that's a good instinct, and I commend you for that. Many people who got hammered on Twitter usually tend to shut off and not want to talk about it anymore. So the fact that you're here says a lot of good stuff about you. So,
and not just doubling down. I appreciate that.
Right? Good on you. So, what can we help you with?
Well, first of all, like I said, I started watching some of Alexander's videos, and the primary one that I focused on was the one on the YouTube homepage for his channel, where he discusses what they view as. Excuse me if I get my pronouns incorrect, because I'm still trying. But what they described for themselves as being non-binary. And one of the things that they said was that non-binary is kind of a mixture between the two genders. And I'm wondering if that's basically the same thing as how you guys view it, or if there's something more that I should focus on.
Yeah, good question. So it's a little bit tricky because non-binary is a very big umbrella, and a lot of people fall underneath it, and they use the word differently. So for one person, it could be, I pick these two genders, man and woman, and I kind of mash them together and create my own gender or something new. Other people are absolutely not interested in either of those. They're like, I reject both. I am my own thing, and I'm directly in the middle. And then there are other people who are like, no, I'm all the way over here. Like, this is the spectrum here that we talk about. I'm all the way over here. I don't even really consider it a spectrum at all. So there are many different ways to view gender. For myself, I kind of also vacillate between presenting more femme or presenting more masc, but I don't consider myself either a man or a woman. It is very much a kind of in the middle thing for me, and I'll lean one way or the other depending on the day. But so my only thought there is ask the individual if you're interested, and they're open to talking about it, and you have that kind of relationship with them, what it means to them, because everybody is going to use the term non-binary a little bit differently. And anywhere else than on Twitter, in the middle of a Twitter feud, usually you will be given the benefit of the doubt if you make a little bit of an error there and assume that it's, oh, you're right in the middle, right? That's what this means. You're just androgynous and you're not either. They might go, oh, well, no, not actually. I'm pretty, on the femme side, and I like to present super womanly, super feminine, but I still consider myself non-binary. Okay, cool. That's their prerogative. But for the most part, it is going to be a case-by-case basis.
Okay, and one of the reasons why I was really kind of confused by it is because Alexander had indicated that they were both non-binary and trans, and I was trying to figure out how that meshes together, and you seem to have helped a bit with that understanding.
Right. Well,
before this past couple of weeks, I always assumed that non-binary and trans were essentially one and the same.
Mm-hmm. And they kind of are, and they kind of aren't. And again, like, you're going to get a lot of these answers from me where it's like, yes and no. Yay, non-binaries. Don't give any yes or no answers. It's always both and. But for a lot of people, they interpret the term trans as a different gender than the one they were assigned at birth. And because technically no one looks at a newborn baby and goes, it's a non-binary person, then every non-binary person is going to technically be trans in that way because their gender is different than the one they were assigned at birth. That said, sometimes people don't feel a lot of connection to that term, especially because there are very specific struggles and issues that binary trans people deal with that a lot of non-binary people haven't dealt with. Likewise, there are some issues that non-binary people deal with that binary trans people don't. So there is a difference in those two communities, and some people may pick one or the other, but there is a lot of overlap there. So I have a very close friend who does identify as trans and non-binary. Myself, I don't use the trans label just because I don't feel my experience matches what people assume the trans experience to be. So as much as I acknowledge that I am not the gender I was when I was assigned when I was born, I don't personally use that word. So there is a lot of overlap there. Hopefully that clarifies it a little bit.
It does help a bit. The next thing that I noticed in Lex's video was that there is discomfort when people sometimes use she/he or sir/ma'am, that makes them uncomfortable. How is somebody supposed to know before talking with them that would be an uncomfortable type of pronoun to use?
Yeah, and this is a ongoing conversation. So okay. We are working towards, collectively as a group of people, a lot of people in the queer community are working towards coming to a place where asking or giving your own pronouns when meeting someone becomes as simple as giving your name. So if you, we want to get it to a place where, in the same way you wouldn't be offended if someone didn't know your name, but also you assume you need to ask someone's name. It's similar in the case of pronouns, right? We don't want people to feel bad if they get it wrong necessarily and make that assumption, but also the assumption should be, oh, I'm going to ask just to make sure and learn more about this person and who they authentically are. In the meantime, the best thing you can do, from my opinion, is to use gender neutral language whenever possible and then correct towards one or the other as needed. So I took a lot of time and effort before I even came out to myself as non-binary to move from saying she or he to them. And not only did it save me syllables, it also was more inclusive, right? So instead of saying ladies and gentlemen, you say hello, folks, or good evening, folks, or, whatever it is you would say, because they're usually gender neutral terms for whatever it is that you're saying. The sir, ma'am thing is still a little bit tricky because you don't really have a respectful gender neutral pronoun to use for somebody in a professional setting. So there are always going to be these sticky points until we revamp language enough to catch up to where we are as a society. But for now, for some practical things, try and get gender neutral language into your brain. It's difficult at first, but it gets easy. It's normal to me now to use they, to use person instead of man or woman. And also to offer your pronouns when you meet somebody. So instead of asking them to reveal something about themselves that they might not feel comfortable doing, because they don't know if you're safe, they don't know if you're going to make fun of them or try to hurt them. Instead, what you do is you say, hi, my name's Steve. I go by he, him. How about you? What's your name? And then you've opened up that space to make it safe for the other person to decide if they want to share their pronouns with you. So I would say don't worry too much about being offensive when you're making the assumption, but be sure to correct it as much as you can as soon as you get that indication from the other person.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and I recognize that all of this can sound a little overwhelming. And I just want to acknowledge that while also pointing out that it's much simpler than it may seem. One of my favorite things about the culture I was raised in was when I went to get my driver's license as a teenager here in Texas. The driving manual had like an entire 1.5-page essay at the very beginning dedicated to explaining why they decided to use the word he rather than he/she, because that way they could save paper and ink. As opposed to just saying they all the way through the damn thing. It's not that, like, I hear how it was for them in writing it, a very confusing and baffling concept. But at the end of the day, using they, them is actually pretty intuitive. It just takes a little bit of getting used to.
Well, I mean, one of the biggest problems that I had, and I'm trying to get past it, is that they, them, their always sounds plural when I say it, and it's just because that's the way they've always been used in my life up to the last few weeks. But also, as an attorney, we often have clauses in contracts where they say exactly what you just said, that, whenever you see a gender, it is to be interpreted as a gender neutral term, even if it's he or she or whatever is being used. It's just kind of a standard. Now, I think I know your position on this, Vi, but Lux indicated in the video that the AMR might be a good replacement that can help people get past that little mental glitch. Do you guys agree with that, or is that something that you think should not be considered?
Neither of those options. I think that if somebody wants to go by AMR or ZZMZer or whatever pronoun that works for them, they should be able to do that. I don't think it shouldn't be considered. I think that it's a viable option. I also say suck it up, because everybody does use they, them all the time whenever they're talking about somebody whose gender doesn't matter. So if you say, when's the plumber getting here? And the other person says, I don't know, they said they'd be here by noon. That's a single person, and everybody knows that only one plumber is showing up. It's just that in that context, the plumber doesn't need to have a gender, and so they is fine. So it's just getting that little bit of a roadblock, and it is a little bit uncomfortable, especially at first, but it also is grammatically correct. Because the dictionary now says so. And also it's been in use since the 1300s. So.
I was going to say, and has for hundreds of years. That's perhaps my favorite argument about all of this, is that we're dramatically trying to change the meaning of words when, no, like, this is old shit. This is just new debates and new frustrations around it.
Right. And it is awkward at first. It totally is, especially if you've only been doing it for a few weeks and you're only just now learning about this. Give yourself time, be patient with yourself. Other people should be patient with you too as you start learning this. It's not going to be an on-off switch, but it's also a totally reasonable ask, I think. It's the same way as to me, it's about the same as saying, your name is too difficult for me to pronounce. Can I call you something else? Right? It's a little bit difficult maybe to pronounce a name that's not from your culture. Sure, but you shouldn't negate the fact that they have a name just because it's a little harder for you to talk to them at first, right? You're going to learn how to pronounce it if you care about that person, if you care about their humanity. And to me, it's the same with pronouns.
Mm-hmm.
And I can understand that, but I guess I go back to like I speak German as a second language, and they've got the C, das, and R. You've got a feminine, you've got a neutral, and you've got a masculine pronoun. And it is just so much easier when you've got a neutral that's already existing, just as kind of a switchover type of a situation. And we just don't have that in the English language yet.
Exactly.
I can easily see this becoming that way. But what's the best way to make that, to convince other people? I mean, not just myself, because I'm trying, I'm doing what I can, but to convince other people to join me and join you in switching to that kind of a thing when they're just not used to it. Yeah.
I would say just do it yourself. Normalize it within the conversations that you have. And if you know people who go by they, them pronouns or AR pronouns or, whichever pronouns they choose, make sure to stick up for that person. If you hear them being misgendered, actually it's they, them. They go by they, them. That's just a thing that they do. And just normalize it in your own circle. You don't have any obligation to fix it for the rest of us. You learning yourself is enough. You normalizing it in your community, in your circle is enough. And my hope is that because internet and because Gen Z and because most school kids now, based on several surveys, know at least one non-binary person personally in their school, in their class, I think that this is just naturally going to be something that we incorporate into the language if we keep using it. So we don't have a gender neutral pronoun now. It might be they, them later. It might be AR. It might be something else. But I think we're moving in that direction already, and we just have to get on board that train.
Okay. And I don't mean to be too opportunist, but if you feel like you need to be more active than that, I can always remind you that Secular Sexuality is looking for Patreons. So please help support the show.
No problem on that, too.
Sounds good. All right. We've got a couple other calls before we can end the show tonight, but thank you so much for calling in, Steve.
Yeah, no problem. You guys take care.
You too.
Have a great night.
I feel like I monopolized that conversation.
Nah, that's your wheelhouse. I'm all for it. When you're good at something, do it. I definitely want to make sure to save some time for Madison to kind of walk us through some resources and not just like stir up all these old wounds and then leave people hanging. But I recognize we've got a ton of people who have called in. So let's continue to dive in if we may.
Yeah, let's keep these 5 minutes each-ish so that we can wrap this up in a timely manner, but I do want to make sure we talk to everybody. So let's try Jonathan again and see if he's back on the line with us. Jonathan in Alabama, are you there?
Back on the line. Am I back on the line?
Yes, yes, perfect.
Yes.
Okay.
How you doing?
Doing good. What can we help you with?
I feel like you've answered that all night. Well, I have cut my father out of my life, which was an incredibly good decision, an incredibly thought out decision, and I am actually really proud of that decision. I have family members in my life who don't think it was a good decision. And aside from just telling them to fuck off, like, what are my options there? Because, they know a little bit of the kind of person he was, but I feel like it makes me look small and petty if I just say, hey, he was an asshole and he has no business in my life. But if I say, you know that my older sister had a scar on her foot because, and I quote, he was going to be the craziest person in his house. And, you know, like there's like some of us, none of their damn business. And like, typically I don't mind telling people it's none of their damn business, but with family, it's a little harder.
Yep. I feel ya.
So Johnathan, I'm curious, like what are they saying exactly? Like, what is their argument, or what are they bringing up to you when they're saying, why isn't he in your life?
Typically, if anybody brings it up, which nobody seems to bring it up anymore because I'm a bit of an abrasive person now, but typically it seems to be along the lines of, he's your father, you'll regret this if he dies, and, you know, that sort of thing, or reminding me of how his health's doing. And genuinely, I'm going to be happy and relieved the day he is dead. And there's not exactly a family-friendly way to put that.
Right.
Yeah.
So when I'm thinking about it, and even just in you describing briefly just how much, you know, pain and abuse that he put you through, without maybe being abrasive or just being blunt about the fact that he hurt you in ways that's irreparable, ways that...
I have a sister who's dead. Like, she is literally dead. She was trans and she died away from us. In a city that was foreign to her. She died there when I was trying to save up enough money to go and figure out how she was doing and where she was. And because of that asshole, I did not have my sister in my life when I was mature enough to accept her for who she was. And that's not something I'm ever going to forgive. And nor do I see any reason I should.
No. That is certainly Yeah.
No, I think what it comes down to, Johnathan, is what is serving you. You know, if being angry at him helps make your life better, be angry. You know, I'm gonna quote our Lord of Levels from our sound tech crew when I say that saying "fuck off" is a perfectly acceptable answer. And if that's what's working for you, great. If talking to a therapist, if commiserating with family, if, you know, sort of sussing out the nuances of this complicated life, if there's value in that for you, if there's relief in that for you, great. If being mad and just saying, fuck no, I don't want to have anything to do with this conversation is working for you, then that's fine too. You certainly have that right. And I don't think that you owe it to anybody other than yourself to examine those feelings.
Can I ask a question, Johnathan?
I certainly enjoy... Oh, go right ahead. Go right ahead.
I'm asking this from a place of having been in a similar situation where I needed to talk about why I wasn't talking to my dad, to family members who were asking why. And I'm wondering, would it be a different answer if he was already dead? Is the fact that he might hear about this, or the fact that it might get back to him playing into this?
No, it would be the exact same thing. I genuinely don't care what the man thinks of me.
Okay.
It'd be like, dang, it is just really tempting to compare people to Hitler when you're talking online, isn't it?
It's contagious. It's worse than the COVID.
Yeah.
No, I get it. I am so empathetic to that, and I'm so sorry that you had to choose to cut someone who should be there for you out of your life for good reason. It sounds like for very good reason. I would echo what Maddie was saying and say, all you need to say is, he has done some terrible things that I don't want to get into with you, but you need to trust me that I am making the right decision for me. Because if they can't do that, if they are earnestly worried about you, then that's one thing, right? And then they will understand that. If they understand that there's stuff, you don't want to get into it, it's hard, it's painful, anger inducing, and it's not a conversation you want to be having right now. Trust me as a person to make this decision and have it be a good one. Then they'll get it. If they don't accept that answer, then you get to say fuck off. Then you get to justly and rightly and feel good about the fact that they clearly are not prioritizing your mental health. They aren't prioritizing you. They care about somebody else. So either a version of you that's no longer, here, or your dad, or some other thing is motivating them, not what's best for Johnathan. So I'd say make sure that everyone who asks this question of you, you say, hey, trust me, there's stuff that happened. I don't want to get into it, but I've given this a lot of thought. This isn't a rash decision. This isn't an emotionally driven one. This is one that is best for my mental health. And if they don't accept that, then fuck them.
Yeah, that sounds fair. What I've been experimenting with is the more religious family members, I've been telling them that if there is a just God in the world, he knows what that man did, and that man knows what he did, and I know what that man did, and there's enough evil in the world without everyone knowing what that man did.
Yeah, that is a good answer, and that should be enough. And if it's not, then you have every right to put distance between yourself and those people. Exactly.
Yeah, right.
Secular Sexuality, empowering people to say fuck off.
It's an important part of consent, being able to not consent.
Yeah, and occasionally get their fuck on. Week to week, different types of episodes.
Different kinds of fucking happening. No. I appreciate you calling in, though, Johnathan. Yeah. We do need to jump to another call, but as you continue to go through this, feel free to give us another call. We'd love to talk with you more.
Absolutely. I love all the ACA shows. Thank you.
Glad to hear it. Take care.
Bye.
Take care of yourself. Put on your own oxygen mask and tell the people that you need to get out of your life to get out of your life.
Yes. Agreed. All right. We've got 2 more calls. Do we have time?
Yeah, let's hit at least one more. What do we got?
All right. Let's go with Linda in the UK. We've got an update from an email that she sent 2 years ago. Linda, can you hear us? Hello.
Can you hear?
Yes.
Hello?
Can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Oh, no. Yes, we can hear you.
I can hear you.
Okay, cool.
Good.
What can we do
Good.
for you?
We're connected. What can we help you with?
Okay. Oh, hi. Yeah, lovely to speak to you all. Yeah, I don't know if you remember me, Christy, because I obviously I didn't speak to you. I emailed you, and I think it was Megan, and you both put a portion of about this in your show. Basically,
very first episodes actually, so it's pretty ingrained in my mind. It was a big moment, but I'd love to hear you just kind of recap it for the audience.
Oh, okay. So I at the time I was having a really difficult time with because I have a daughter who basically transgender daughter, lovely person, but unfortunately my husband was extremely negative towards her and very angry about it, wouldn't accept it, and I was having a really difficult time with that. And I come from my actual background is my own family are very, very strongly religious, indoctrinated me when I was young, but I'm an atheist and have sort of break free from all that. But obviously they don't agree with how I'm allowing things to be for my daughter. And I just thought it'd be lovely to speak to you. It was really, do really value your show. And I think you said things like about how my husband, perhaps, wouldn't perhaps change his mind, and it linked to what you were saying about how what was it? I'm sorry, I'm losing my track. I'm sorry, I've forgotten what I was going to say.
Yeah, it can be a little bit of a stressful moment. I definitely get that. Why don't you tell us a little bit about where you're at tonight, and maybe what's on your mind at the moment?
Sure, yeah. And so, the update is that I'm now divorced from him. And
sounds like congratulations are in order, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have 2 children, and one is still in touch with her dad, but the oldest one, who is transgender, is not, and his behaviour really hasn't changed at all in that sense. But we're doing all right. We're much better than what we were. But my daughter is sort of in the middle of things, and the old transgender daughter, who, if I were to go and visit the extended family, they will still refer to her in her old name, and will refuse to acknowledge it and think that I'm wrong. And they've got these very sort of dogmatic, strong beliefs, although she still wants to see them.
Yeah.
But my child still, and there is love there, but they just, they've got all these views that, that the religious things, that the indoctrination and all the things that they've been told, these things are wrong, and you hit a brick wall with them. You can't get anywhere with them. So it's quite frustrating, and I feel bad for my, it's sort of, I'm coping all right with it, actually. I'm not really here because I suppose I'm not calling you because I really need help. I just thought it'd be lovely just to call and just to say hello and thank you for what you're doing, but I don't know really what to ask you, what to say, where to, it's because it's a difficult situation, because obviously having divorced and all that, it's still wanted to keep some level of normality for the children, and I don't want, and to keep whatever good feeling is there. Mm-hmm. And aside from the issue with them not agreeing with how my child is, which is silly, we don't get on, strangely. So at the moment, it's kind of, we don't live close anyway, and with the COVID thing, I haven't seen them for a while, but seen them physically for a while. But I just thought, I don't really know what to say. I apologise. I feel like I should have something profound to say, or
no. Well, let me ask you. I mean, for the last year and a half, I'm sure before that, you have been coping with this reality of loving somebody who is then being rejected by the rest of your family. And I'm sure you by extension in a lot of ways. And I'm curious just how you've been able to manage that situation. I mean, what has kept you safe? What has kept you sane? What has kept you healthy during this difficult period? Because I know that there are people watching who are just glad to know that it can work.
Yeah. I think I mentioned in that email that I've had been taking my child to Gendered Intelligence. That's run by people who are identify as transgender. It's sort of like a youth group, and my daughter attended that, and then other parents meet up. And so when I was in the situation, I still went to parents' meetings and got a lot of advice and support, because really the way he was behaving was quite abusive, and it helped me to realise that and to get what I needed to get away from the situation and to, protect us all, really. So that was, and then I've actually had a bit of counselling as well, just to help me to sort of think through it all. And that's it, really. I'm just sort of really, but I'm kind of okay in myself. I kind of got a way of seeing things quite clearly, but I guess I feel like I do really, at the same time, I face a lot of the, ongoing issues with the sort of quite strong, religious sort of side of things. And then my husband for slightly different reasons, not the same religious sort of reasoning, but it's so I guess, I don't know really what to say, but it puzzles me why religions sort of hold on to these, you must be heterosexual and you must be, and all these silly rules that they make up. And it's always frustrated me. I didn't know my child would turn out to be transgender. Before that, I could never understand it either. So, yeah.
Well, Linda, I just want to thank you for calling in and updating us, not only because it's a good update, it's a good story, and we love hearing the people we've talked to before have come to a place that is more comfortable, but also it's such a beautiful way to wrap up this conversation that we've been having by having a mother call in and say, hey, I got my kid out of a bad situation. I accept them for who they are. I'm being supportive. That's so affirming. So thank you for calling in.
Yes. Lovely to speak to you. And thank you all for what you're doing. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Well, have a lovely rest of your day. I think it's the day there, 6 hours. No, it's probably pretty late there.
It's actually like 2:00, 2:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
I don't really know
have a lovely rest of your night.
Okay. All right. Bye. Thanks very much. Okay. Andrew, bye.
All right. That is it for calls for tonight.
Yeah, just good to know that these stories can have happy endings. I'm actually going to see if I can't dig out that clip of us back in January of 19. I still have that email from Linda, and I remember reading that because it was one of those like, what do you do in the face of something so huge? And I am sure that a lot of the folks who are listening to this, I mean, we've already seen it from so many of our callers. There is that question of how do you meet the demand of something so overwhelming? And on the one hand, I think you just have to embrace and accept the fact that you, quote, can't. On the other hand, I want to really highlight the power of just showing up. We've mentioned it a couple of times tonight, and by just being a good mom, by just taking care of yourself, taking care of your kids, by being a good uncle, by being a good, all the different people we've spoken to tonight, if you can just take care of yourself, be a good person, and take care of the people around you, that's certainly not a simple thing or an easy thing to do, even if it sounds so simple. Mm-hmm. Beyond that, Madison, what kinds of resources or things would you point people towards? I know that these are not simple problems to solve, but I'd love to hear if you have any particular recommendations on how people could get started.
Yeah. And I mean, you took the words out of my mouth of just accepting what you can't control. You can't control other people. You can't control how they think or how they feel. Easier said than done, obviously, with that form of acceptance, but just even starting there and just accepting what you can control, what you yourself can do for you is super important. And when we're looking at these sorts of things and how to cope, focusing on your strengths, focusing on what you know to be true about yourself, because as I was mentioning earlier, feelings of hopelessness and worthlessness can come up a lot, and it can be incredibly heavy. So focusing in on your strengths, digging into that family of choice and helping them to elevate you in that sense. Something I offer to clients sometimes, especially when talking about problematic family members, is write a letter. And that's a letter that you never have to send. That's a letter where you get to say everything you want to say to them, everything you want to tell them, but you just can't. Maybe one day you will show it to them. Maybe one day when you get to a chance of get to a point of healing in the relationship, maybe that's something you will share. But you may never send it, and it can feel incredibly healing to just get those feelings out, get them on paper. Geo, who called in earlier, gave a really good recommendation when he said he was going to hop off and go meditate. That's just another piece where if you can really hone in on some mindfulness-based practices, even just simple breathing exercises or meditations that you can, pull up from the internet. There's tons of free ones out there. There's tons of apps. Focusing on yourself, getting back to that mind-body connection, as I mentioned earlier, is super important so you can stay in tune with yourself as you're trying to heal. You should only allow someone to be a part of your life if they exhibit good, consistent actions, where they demonstrate that they're there to be part of that healing and growth process, ultimately. And I think some piece that we sometimes forget about with family when we're dealing with that alienation or dealing with that separation is planning ahead for important dates in your life, such as your birthday or a holiday that usually is spent with family, and planning ahead to be able to, do something or be with that family of choice on those days. So it doesn't just creep up on you and you realize you don't have anywhere to go, or, those feelings of rejection maybe sink in a little bit more. So plan ahead for things like that. When we're talking about seeking deeper long-term healing, individual therapy is always a really, really good option. Another thing that I don't think people necessarily consider, or maybe doesn't come to mind, is group therapy or processing group. If you just type in Google search family of origin processing group, hopefully there is one near you, because this is so common that there are typically groups in your area that will offer that type of support. And just being able to be amongst other people that are kind of going through similar but different circumstances and finding that universality in it can be incredibly healing, incredibly important in your own journey to accepting what is. Just a couple of recommendations. And then I know Christy said earlier, I gave him a couple of resources as far as books and things that are linked, in the video. So check those out.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the right response. I mean, get thee to a therapist if this is something that is really itching over a long period of time. I'll mention just very briefly that I am myself about to offer a process group specifically for people healing from religious trauma. And so if that's you out in this audience and that's something you'd like to consider, check that out at valencecounseling.com. We've got a number of different books and resources in the show notes to this episode, not the least of which Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents by Lindsay Gibson, which is a great place to start. There's a number of those resources as well as Maddie's blog on this topic listed. Madison, other than your blog and some of those kinds of resources, how can people find you if they're interested in therapy, if they're interested in diving in a little bit deeper to healing from some of these issues?
Sure. So my website is sunandmooncounseling.com. So, just as you would think it's spelled, Sun and Moon Counseling. And I am in the Austin area, so I'm able to work with anybody in Texas via telehealth. And I'm available and definitely acquiring interest to start my own family of origin processing group as well.
Excellent. Well, glad to hear that there are a number of things that people can turn towards in these moments. On top of that, I, of course, want to mention Recovering from Religion. Recoveringfromreligion.org in particular is a great place to start. It's, if nothing else, a hub to a number of resources, particularly resources in your area, that is going to be sort of curated and in a way provided to you by somebody who's probably sat in a chair very similar to the one you're in right now. There's an incredibly talented group of volunteers that are remarkably compassionate and happy to help point you towards something in your area. And of course, we want to encourage people to embrace their chosen family here at the Atheist Community of Austin. We have, of course, a number of great ACA Facebook groups. Just this past week, we had a couple of our wonderful mods and volunteers create a fan page for this very program. So if you are interested in a little bit more secular sexuality in your life, I have to show just incredible gratitude for the volunteers that have set that up for us. Check out Secular Sexuality. What is the actual terminology? Let me pull that up real quickly. I apologize. The Secular Sexuality official fan group, unofficial fan group on Facebook. And outside of that, be in the Discord server. Be connecting with folks online. Be in community, whether that is with friends, whether that is with just like-minded folks. It can be really isolating out there right now. And so I hope that everybody is doing their best to take care of themselves.
Yeah. If you want to get in touch with us on the show and don't feel comfortable maybe calling in, or if you don't like staying up super, super late like Linda does, then feel free to email us at sex@atheist-community.org. About once a month, we have a mailbag episode where we read all the emails that we get from you guys and answer them on air. We also have a hotline that is not as utilized as we would like. So help us feel special and give us a call there at 512-666-0ASK. And leave a voicemail, and we will play that on air and answer your question there. So there are ways to get in touch with us, to ask your questions, to update us if you've called before and want to give us kind of where you are now, the lay of the land, without having you call in live if that's not your cup of tea.
And then, of course, I want to thank all of the wonderful folks that helped to make this specific show happen. Our incredible crew that has put together this episode. Thank y'all. We've got our beloved crew cat that is overpowering the sex appeal of the rest. As well as our wonderful call screeners and production team. We're so thankful for all of y'all's help. We're, of course, grateful to everybody who is watching tonight. I absolutely want to remind you that these topics can be uncomfortable. As much as we like to provide community by having these discussions, and as much as we're grateful to you for participating in that community, it may be a good idea to take a warm bath, to watch an old episode of a silly TV show that you've seen 10,000 times, to take a moment to just recharge your batteries. And, after you've had a chance to do that, after you've caught your breath, we, of course, like to remind people and encourage people each and every week to take a special moment just for yourself to give yourself a big old orgasm. Or, better yet, give somebody else one.
What are we doing, man? What are we doing?